International Relations and Global Affairs major of Mahidol University International College is proud to host the third event of the semester on Russia's war against Ukraine and its implications for global security. I'm pleased to formally welcome and would like to thank our honored guests who have graciously taken the time to be here with us today, Mr. Georg Schmidt, Mr. Jon Åström Gröndahl, Mr. Michal Sveda, Mr. Remi Lambert, and Mr. Pavlo Orel. It is a pleasure to have you all here with us this morning, and we look forward to each of your discussions with great anticipation. I would also like to thank the Social Science Division for their hard work in organizing this event, making it all possible. Thank you to all participants for attending. We hope that you'll find it captivating, insightful, and thought-provoking. This seminar is an embellishing opportunity to get a glimpse into each country's perspective on the global conflict. To start off, I would like to welcome Social Science Division Chair, Assistant Professor William J. Jones, up to the podium for some opening remarks, please. Everyone, please give a big round of applause.
Good morning. Dignitaries, faculty, students, and staff, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you all, and thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this unique event organized by the Social Science Division. International Relations and Global Affairs major prides itself on providing students quality education in the classroom and hosting events that enrich the learning environment outside of the classroom. It goes without saying that this event qualifies as reinforcing both. The Russian war against Ukraine, which began in February of last year, sent shockwaves throughout the world and has unleashed forces not seen since World War II. While the outcome of the war is and cannot be known yet, one thing is certain. The world which existed prior to February 24th, 2022 is no longer, and we are all on a new trajectory of history. To help us understand some of the current effects and possibly look into the future is our panel of distinguished diplomats who are here to offer unique insights owed to many decades of experience in their respective ministries of foreign affairs. Each European country represented here today has a different and unique history with the Russian Federation's predecessor state, the Soviet Union, and this impacts their respective policies, perspectives, and peoples. Your Excellencies and dignitaries, thank you all for being here with us today, being so gracious with your time, and providing your experience and insights to the guests in attendance. I hope everyone finds today's event highly informative and enriching. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to our guest of honor. Thank you.
To proceed with the seminar, it's my honor to formally introduce our accomplished guests today who have joined us for today's discussion, starting off with Mr. Georg Schmidt, who is currently the Ambassador of Germany to Thailand. He has held various positions in the Federal Foreign Office of Berlin and the Embassy of Germany, including experiences as Deputy Head. I would now like to welcome Mr. Schmidt up to the stage, please. I would like to introduce our second guest speaker, Mr. Jon Åström Gröndahl, who obtained positions of Deputy Director General and Head of Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is currently the Ambassador of Sweden to Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. I would now like to invite Mr. Gröndahl up to the stage, please. Now to introduce our next guest speaker, Mr. Michal Sveda, who has held various positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including Deputy Director, and has acquired years of experience working with NATO as well. He is currently the Deputy Ambassador and Head of Mission of the Czech Republic in Thailand. Our next guest speaker is Mr. Remi Lambert, who held positions of First and Political Counsellor, as well as Deputy Director for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is currently the Premier Counsellor and Deputy Head of Mission of France to Thailand and Vietnam. Our next guest speaker, Mr. Pavlo Orel, who has experience as the Secretary and Counsellor in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is currently the Chargé d'Affaires of Ukraine and Deputy Chief of Mission in Thailand. time to proceed with the seminar, I would like to ask them to begin the talk now. Thank you.
Okay. Words? Yes. You can hear me loud and clear. Good morning again, and thank you for coming to discuss a topic which is not pleasant, filled with a lot of human suffering, with a lot of anxiety, but equally important, and if you're interested in international relations, and even for people who are not interested in international relations, it concerns all of us, because it concerns the way we want to live together in the 21st century. 459 days of war. Remember, some people said, oh, Kiev will fall in 3 days. It's 459 days of a war. And the Russians are not even allowed to call it a war. It's still a special military operation. So if this is not a war, what is a war then? And at the same time, when you listen to Russian television, they say it's a war with the West, it's a war with NATO. So you're not allowed to call it a war with Ukraine, it's a special military operation, but it's the whole Russia is in a war. Everybody wants to dismember Russia. Russia feels attacked. I'll come back to that. And it's important to know this and to follow also Russian media, because then you can have a better understanding of what Russians are being told about this in their own television. Let me remind you also, and I'm doing this in the presence of the Ukrainian Chargé d'Affaires, who is here for the country that is under attack, for the countries whose citizens are being bombarded every day and every night. I mean, you just need to see drones, cruise missiles and others raining down on Kiev and on other cities, and not on military targets. So I'm talking, he is the one who is suffering the most, but I think that's the one thing we have to remember when we talk about it. We're talking about a conflict, about a war that kills children, women every day. It kills soldiers, Russian soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, many of them, but it also kills mostly civilians in Ukraine, not in Russia. But I'm sitting here from a German perspective. 3 days after the invasion, our Chancellor gave a speech in the Bundestag, and he used the word Zeitenwende. So that means an epochal, a change of epochs, a change of times. And it's hard to translate in English, so that's why in many English journals you will hear that word also, Zeitenwende. And it was indeed a Zeitenwende for us in Germany, because we changed our approach to foreign policy, and it was not easy. Germany had a very long-standing approach to not export arms to any conflict region. Now we are one of the largest supporters of Ukraine after the United States. Just the end of March, there was a package of 15 billion euros in arms and other support for Ukraine. So we're the largest supporter. It took us some time to change the position, but we made very clearly that this is not a short-term support. We will support Ukraine as long as it takes. I think there were a few miscalculations from President Putin and his entourage about Germany. Let me talk about them. One, they completely miscalculated our will to support Ukraine. We view this attack on Ukraine as an attack on UN principles and on European security. We wanted to get rid of the idea that big powers have spheres of influences around them, where a small power, if you have a big neighbor who tells you, no, this one you cannot do, this one you cannot do. And the European peace and security order is designed in a different way, and this is the first time that borders have been actually violated like this. The last time we saw that was 1991, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and you saw a global coalition against this. So we have a lot of conflicts. You can study them, civil wars, others, but that one country just invades a neighbor and says, okay, this is now part of me. You have to look back for a long time to see that. Miscalculation number 2, Russia completely miscalculated our economic resilience. Last year they thought we switch off the gas, and we had maneuvered ourselves into a situation of dependency on Russian gas. and the Germans will come kneeling and begging for us. We didn't. Within 10 months, we reduced our dependency on Russian gas. We resourced it with the help of our European friends. Norway is playing an important role, but also others. We built 2 LNG terminals. We took a difficult decision to use coal longer, which is not good for climate change. We feel it's an emergency. So we weaned ourselves off of Russian gas in a very, very short time. So sometimes democracies can be much stronger than they look from the outside. I think dictatorships, they feel that if there's an argument within a democratic country, they feel it's a weakness. To me, it's a strength that you have different arguments. Miscalculation number 3, Russia miscalculated or thought that they are the only successor state of the Soviet Union. Why do I say that? Germans feel a strong sense of, how can I put this, guilt, responsibility because of our history towards the Soviet Union. I'm different because I'm representing a country that has basically waged war on the Soviet Union. And we always tried very, very hard to build a very constructive relationship, not just with Russia, but also with the other countries in Central and Eastern Europe. Maybe some Russians thought that, oh, the Germans will never stand up against us because of this historic guilt. But make no mistake, Russia is not the Soviet Union. The German army did the same or even more damages in Ukraine, in Belarus, in the Baltic countries. So if there is a moral and historical responsibility, and there is one, it extends to Russia as much as to Ukraine. It extends to Russia as much as it extends to Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, and Estonia. The fourth, is Russia thought that nuclear threats would work. And you remember, on the day of the invasion, Putin said something like, if you help Ukraine, your countries will see consequences that you have not seen in your history. I translate that from diplomatic speech into normal thing. We are going to dismember your neighbor, and if you dare to help him, you'll be nuked. Forgive my undiplomatic words, but this is how you can translate it. And Russia continues to threaten nuclear war on its neighbors. Watch Russian television. It continues to threaten like France, the UK, the US, and Germany. And it worked initially. People are scared of a nuclear war, and rightly so. It's something that we have to be very, very careful, because once unleashed, these weapons cannot be taken back. But somehow our society got used to it. If you hear somebody who threatens you every week with extinction, it doesn't mean that we take the threat lightly. Very careful. But somehow there was a miscalculation. Where do we go from here? Germany supports peace, but a just peace. And a just peace is one based on United Nations principles. And stopping hostilities now without a clear plan for a Russian withdrawal from occupied territory will just be rewarding the aggressor. I want to finish with 3 important points out of many. One is, we often hear, oh, by giving more weapons to Ukraine, you're prolonging the conflict. We hear that all the time. We hear that also inside of Germany. Why do we do that? But it turns around the role of the victim and the aggressor. Imagine somebody beats you up and you resist, and then somebody says, because you resist, you prolong you are responsible for violence. And especially some of the countries who say that have had no problems when it was serving their political interest to also support very long-term struggles. That's my first point. My second point is, like, we talked about peace, but we have to think hard, what kind of peace can we achieve? What kind of peace do we want? And if I hear how the Russian rhetoric is getting more and more shrill, like Ukraine should disappear, Ukraine should even be partitioned, Ukrainian language shouldn't be there at all. that cannot be peace. That is just a going back to the 19th or 18th or 17th century. And this is why I think it's so important, because if this stands, it has implications also for these regions. Look at the borders in Southeast Asia. You have colonial borders. People could say the same thing, for instance, about 3 provinces in Thailand and say, oh, these are not Thais. They speak Malay, they're Muslims. It's a colonial border. We have to correct historical injustices. Once you start doing that, you open a whole box, a whole can of worms. But we have to think like, what kind of Russia do we want to deal with in the future? And maybe this comes up in the question time. And the third point is, I'm often asked, what can Thailand do? Thailand is so far away from the conflict. Thailand is, I'm, for instance, surprised that I have not heard from Thailand or from ASEAN as a whole any condemnation of these nuclear threats. ASEAN feels very strongly about non-nuclearization. Zopfan, the zone of peace and stability in ASEAN. Even China condemned the threat of nuclear weapons. Why not ASEAN? And these things do matter in diplomacy. They do matter. Whether you feel that, oh, anybody is on your side, or people are just neutral bystanders, or whether you feel that there's diplomatic resistance. Why do these resolutions matter in New York? Because they show clearly that the world is standing with the victim of aggression and is not looking away when there's aggression. So it's not business as usual. I mean, just yesterday I read on the Russian embassy Twitter account that there are bilateral consultations on international informational security. I think there are many other questions, but you as students can ask your MPs, how do you stand on this? This is something we do in Germany a lot. We ask our MPs, we show them that we care. And Thailand's voice, I don't think that President Putin would listen to a phone call from Thailand saying, hey, can you stop this? No, I'm being realistic, but I think whatever Thailand does, if I compare that, for instance, the Indonesian president, he traveled to Moscow and he traveled to Kiev. Not an easy travel. And he's far away, why should he do it? But he did it, he tried to invest some capital, political capital, and others. So anybody who's serious about bringing a peace should listen to also Ukraine. And we just had the Chinese peace envoy traveling to European countries. We had close, intense discussions. Maybe there are other initiatives, but what I say is for a real peace and a just peace, and that must be based on international law. Thank you very much.
I go next? Okay. Great. Good morning, everyone. Good William, Professor, thanks so much for inviting us to my talk today. I appreciate a lot this opportunity to come here to discuss, compare, and to explain about what is happening in Ukraine and also the Swedish and European views on these developments. So thanks a lot. I will probably repeat and underline some of the things already mentioned by my esteemed German colleague. And this is not only because EU and its member states are aligned and stand together, and firmly so, but also because some things are so very important and thereby worth repeating. You mentioned, dear Georg, about miscalculations. And I think it's also fair to say that maybe we should not be that surprised by the Russian miscalculations. Personally, I believe that maybe we also gave them reasons to believe that they could do this and get away with it. In hindsight, there are a lot of writings on the walls. I think that we underestimated Mr. Putin. If we look back 20 years, you could go even longer than that. We had the wars in Chechnya. We have had all the targeted killings, the poisoning of dissidents. We had the war in Georgia. But we still kept thinking that he will change, or Russia will change. And I hope that Russia will change. But I think there are some lessons to be learned also for European countries in this regard. This will be important for the future, because we have to realize that Russia will still be there, and we need to have relations with Russia. This is very important. Again, let us be reminded, and let us not forget what we are discussing today. I would like to describe it as the most clear-cut military aggression and breach of territorial integrity that we have had since, I believe it was in August 1990, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. I think this is important to keep in mind, since that in itself speaks for the seriousness of the situation. It is also important since the aggressor, the Russian Federation, of course claims something completely different. Russia is not even calling it a war, as we heard, but a special military operation. And yes, it is special, but not for the reasons Russia would like us to think. There is a proverb that I think is fitting here. It says that you can fool some people sometimes, but not all the people all the times. I think that we have to remain vigilant when it comes to there's an information war basically going on. We have to remain vigilant about this. A lot of fake news. Let me explain why I think it is special, why it is different from other conflicts. Again, my German colleague Georg Schmidt has often pointed at two points that makes it different. Namely, the first one, Russia is threatening to make use of its nuclear arsenal. And now we heard the other day also from the President of Belarus, Lukashenko. Also, you could say, threatening with the nuclear arsenal. That's the first one. Two, there is an ongoing annexation of Ukrainian land that actually started already in 2014 with Crimea. Again, that also refers to our maybe underestimation of Mr. Putin. It's been ongoing for almost 10 years now. And then we have all the other facts, of course. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is a blatant violation of the independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and thus a most serious violation of the United Nations Charter. It is also the most serious threat to European peace and security since the end of the Second World War. And why is that? Well, because this is not only an attack on Ukraine, but an attack on our security order and the ideals of a rules-based order. As such, the Russian aggression is not just threatening the liberty of Ukraine, but also the liberty of the rest of Europe and the whole multilateral system. And those are the reasons why the EU and Sweden stand united with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people for as long as it takes. I think it's crucial to understand this. Proximity matters, as always. This is an existential issue, or at least it could be described as an existential issue for many European countries. Not least for Finland and Sweden. Finland, our neighboring country, with a long border with Russia. Finland has been invaded by Russia several times in history. And my own country, Sweden, we have fought 11 wars against Russia since the 12th century, but still with control of the Baltic Sea as a main theme. I personally, let me end by this, I personally believe that there are certain moments in history where you have to choose, where there is a moral obligation, a moral imperative to take sides. And for me, the war on Ukraine is one of those moments. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here. So, I would like to expand on some of the points the ambassadors made already. Firstly, why does this matter to Thailand? You might think that, well, it's another war, very, very far from our region. It doesn't matter to us very much. We don't feel any big repercussions, although there are some economical ones. So why does it matter to Thailand? And the ambassadors already touched upon some of the points. This is basically the first time after the UN came into place, UN Charter was adopted, when a permanent Security Council member attacks its neighbor to grab a territory. So it's a blatant land grab. And although it happened before, like with the Iraqi example, this is the first time of such a scale war. And obviously directly challenges the international system that is based on the UN Charter and the principle of non-aggression, that aggression against another country is illegal. Obviously before that, war was just a tool in international relations, and up until the first half of the 20th century, the war was basically a legitimate tool. After the UN Charter was adopted, the situation changed, and obviously the result of the war in Ukraine matters not only to Europe and to the security order in Europe, but to the whole world, because it will set an example. If the Russians win, then there will be a big precedent that land grabs are possible. Land grabs pay off. If the Russians win in Ukraine, what would be the lesson for China, for example? I would argue that would encourage China to do the same in this region. Maybe Taiwan will be the first in the line, but also if Chinese invasion in Taiwan succeeds, there might be more invasions. How about Laos? How about Vietnam? How about Philippines? So it's a very dangerous situation. So we have to make sure that Russia does not succeed in Ukraine, not only for the sake of security in Europe, but for the sake of the international order as a whole. That's my first point. Secondly, and the ambassadors also already touched upon that, what Thailand should do. In Thai history, there is a deep principle of not taking sides. In the Thai history, there was always like this principle actually paid off, because you've been in between like big powers in the past, UK on the one side, France on the other side, and not taking sides was a way to survive. But we in Europe, we experienced different situations where not taking sides didn't pay off actually. When if you didn't take sides in one conflict, when your neighbor is attacked, then the others don't take sides if you are attacked later. So we learned in hard lessons that taking sides is actually beneficial, because you should take care of what's happening to other countries in order to make other countries take care of what's happening to you later. So this fence-sitting of the Thai government maybe is based on the experience of your own history. But as I mentioned before, if Russians succeed in Ukraine, then there's a China who takes lessons, and that could mean a lot of problems for the whole region and for Thailand as well. So I would argue Thailand should take lessons from the history of the world, and should take sides. And let's hope that the new government that's being formed If it comes to the office, then let's hope it will change at least a little bit the stance of Thailand towards this conflict. And thirdly, very briefly, what you might ask, what is the solution of the conflict? Some people say there's no military solution of the conflict. We should negotiate. We should sit to the negotiating table, and even wrong agreement or uneven agreement is better than continuation of war. I would argue that if we do it now, if we force Ukraine to sit at the negotiating table with the Russians now, it would only mean a short break in conflict. The Russians would rearm, would refill their arsenals, and would attack again in 1 or 2 years. So the only lasting solution to this conflict is a complete victory of Ukraine. There's no other solution that would last. So that's why, obviously, it's up to Ukraine to determine the concrete terms. But from our point of view, we stand ready to support Ukraine until they liberate all the territories that were taken by the Russians illegally. And then I would argue, and it's my own opinion, the lasting peace could only be achieved if we give Ukraine the security guarantees, if we accept them to NATO. If Ukraine is in NATO, it's off limits for Russia. The Russians would never ever attack Ukraine again if Ukraine is a NATO member. So I would argue this is the final solution for this conflict. Make Ukraine win. Let's get all the Russian forces out of the Ukraine territory and then accept Ukraine to NATO. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And first of all, I want to thank Michal University International College for hosting me. I would like to echo what the Ambassador of Germany, the Ambassador of Sweden, and my colleague of the Czech Republic have said. We share exactly the views on the aggression made by Russia against Ukraine. I try not maybe to repeat, I had in my notes many elements that have been already issued by the distinguished gentlemen. I would just maybe add some elements that were actually in the concept note I had before this morning concerning the changing nature of European security related to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. I will have 3 points. The first of all, the Ambassador of Germany and the Ambassador of Sweden have talked about miscalculation from Russia. And actually one of the miscalculations was that there will be that the European Union and the European Union member states would not react or would react in a very weak manner to the aggression of Ukraine. That was not the case. The European bloc stood firm at the first days of the aggression and until now. First of all, because of the very strong and courageous reaction of Ukraine, and we are all here to pay tribute to the courage and resilience of the people and forces of Ukraine. This reaction of the European Union, this cohesion and unity, I would just stress 4 points. First, it was unity on the principles. As has already been said, we all reacted in recalling the principle of sovereignty, the defense of international law, the independence of Ukraine, the respect of the United Nations Charter. We Europeans, and also beyond Europe. These principles have also been stated recently by our President when meeting President Zelensky in May 14 with the support to the Ukrainian peace plan, which is based on these principles. Second element, unity in solidarity. The European continent has faced a tremendous challenge in terms of humanitarian reaction to the aggression of Ukraine by Russia. So far, more than 4 million refugees on the European continent. For France, we have an important number, but it's a small number compared to our neighbors. We have 100,000 refugees, more than 100,000 refugees, but let's talk about Germany, more than 1 million, Poland, the Czech Republic, all European countries are experiencing this challenge. In terms of assistance, we have developed our assistance since the beginning of the war with 18 billion euros so far. Third element, unity in a common pressure. The scope of this pressure is to weaken the Russian ability to continue the war. Our objective is to stop immediately the war and to have Russian troops withdrawing from Ukraine and restoring Ukraine in its international recognized borders. This pressure is made through sanctions. These sanctions are targeting many elements: budget, oil revenues, bank transactions, with frozen assets, private entities. The focus is to stop the war. We are focusing in particular the economically strategic goods and priority battlefield goods. In addition to that, we have also pressure through legal support, because there are currently war crimes that are committed by Russia, unfortunately, on the Ukrainian territory, and these war crimes have to be judged. They have to face a tribunal. So we participate as France to the support, international support, to build the legal response. Last point on the cohesion and the unity of Europe. It's the development and the progress of the idea of a European strategic autonomy. Economically, we realized our dependence to the energy sources from Russia, and there's a major shift undergoing on the European continent concerning to reducing our dependence and speeding up, by the way, also our energy transition. Second element, which was in the concept note, I read that I had to address the elements on the consequences on defense and NATO. I will try to be very short, but the German ambassador referred to the Zeitenwende. In France, we call it un changement de paradigme, a change of paradigm. With this war, Ukraine is exercising its right self-defense on the basis of the international law, let's say the Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. The European, and France with them, we are supporting this self-defense effort. And the elements of the European defense have strongly evolved since 2 years to adapt to this new challenge. Let's talk about the European Peace Facility, which was created at the beginning for Africa in 2004. Now it's an instrument for an assistance to Ukraine in terms of delivery of ammunition and some elements for the defense, for the self-defense of Ukraine. In terms also of training missions, we are also working hard to train, and so far 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained through the support of the European Union members. As for national contribution for France, we are committed to deliver support to Ukraine, and it has been reminded in a joint statement between President Macron and President Zelensky 2 weeks ago. And this support concerns the equipment of Ukrainian units with armored vehicles, let's say with the capabilities to defend the civilian population against strikes, and the training of personnel. Last element for the European Union, the progress of the concept of strategic autonomy in the field of defense. Under the French presidency of the European Union, we pushed forward and we adopted the frame which is called the Global Compass, the Global Strategic Compass. And this is a strategic frame to speed up, to reinforce the capability of us, the Europeans, to act on the defense field. The tools, existing tools like the Common Security Defense Policy were also adapted to address the challenge of the war. A word on NATO, the aggression by Russia to the Russian aggression of Ukraine has also changed the views on some views on NATO. Basically, we had a tremendous progress in the idea of interoperability of the Ukrainian force and the members, the NATO members. As for France, President Macron, when meeting President Zelensky, also reiterated the support for France to progress in this interoperability and support to do almost what we could do to support this rapprochement with NATO. We have several steps ahead. Tomorrow there will be an informal meeting which will address in Oslo many issues concerning these concepts. Last words concerning the consequences in the world. First of all, for Europe, on the European construction, which is a progress, well, for decades, the European continent has shaped towards a more and more integration. The aggression of Ukraine has also impacts on the process of the European, for the unity of the European continent. We have now Ukraine with a status of candidate country, which is a very important element, and there was the new concept of the European political community, which came out of the Prague summit last year in October, which is bridging the countries outside of the European Union and other countries in the European continent sharing the same values. My last word is just to concern the outside of Europe. This conflict, as it has been said by the ambassador and my colleague, is not a European only for a European issue. This conflict, this aggression of Ukraine is a matter for everyone in the world. We need diplomatic global efforts to help to have a hand to this conflict. And in this region in particular, the ASEAN countries have made a lot of work for decades to try to solve their differences, to try to have convergence of views through peace and stability. We expect and we hope to have a lot of support, a very important support from your countries in this region, and especially from Thailand. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to speak before you regarding the consequences on European and global security caused by Russia's aggression against Ukraine from the perspective of my country. And I thank for brilliant inputs by my European colleagues, and I am very grateful for support of all the countries present here, just ambassadors of which are present here, for supporting my country during this war. It has been more than a year as Russia started its brutal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The war unprovokedly waged by the Kremlin near-imperialist and expansionist ambitions against the independent country. It has brought devastation, ruining, pain to the Ukrainian people. The aggression which is ongoing despite numerous international efforts to end it. Russian propaganda claimed Ukraine would only last a few days. Ukrainian defenders liberated, as of now, nearly half of the areas occupied by the Russian troops since the start of the full-scale military invasion. This process will continue until the complete deoccupation of our sovereign territory within the internationally recognized borders. Russia failed to reach its strategic objectives of occupying entire Ukraine, destroying Ukraine's statehood and erasing Ukrainian identity. The pro-Ukrainian coalition in the world remains strong and consolidated. During the G7 summit, the world leaders confirmed their commitment to stand together against Russia's illegal, unjustifiable and unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine, and as well as to provide the financial, humanitarian, military and diplomatic support Ukraine requires as long as it takes. Continuation of timely military and technical assistance from our partners is needed to end the war by Ukraine's victory in 2023. During President Zelensky's visits to Italy, Germany, France, Great Britain this month, significant military support was confirmed by the leading European states. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, Belgium, Denmark, Portugal, and the Netherlands agreed to work on creation of a coalition of fighter jets. And all the mentioned countries are members of the North Atlantic Alliance. Thus, Ukraine considers NATO membership as the best security guarantee for our country. Every independent state has an inalienable sovereign right to determine its future, including ways to ensure its own security. Ukraine exercises its right and seeks to strengthen its own security by joining the Euro-Atlantic system of collective security. This policy is not aimed to undermine the security of other countries. Russia has claimed that regional security cannot be achieved by expanding military blocs, insisting that its security concerns and interests should be taken into account. In this regard, I would like to emphasize that legitimate security concerns and interests of all countries, including Ukraine, which are in line with the provisions of international law, must be also taken seriously and addressed. The very fact of bordering with NATO member states cannot be considered as a threat to the national security of the Russian Federation, since from the very beginning of its post-Soviet existence it already had borders with them. Finland's accession to NATO and Sweden's expected accession to the alliance do not increase security risks for the Russian Federation. Likewise, they will not grow with Ukraine's accession to NATO. Russia's use of the thesis about security threats from NATO expansion is an artificial or imitation pretext for the realization of the revanchist neo-colonial and neo-imperial aspirations aimed at capturing and destroying Ukraine as an independent state. Some words about the evolution of the stance of the Ukrainian people towards NATO. According to many polls conducted before 2014, Ukrainian public opinion on NATO membership was split, with the majority standing against joining the North Atlantic Alliance. Following the Russian military intervention in 2014 with attempted annexation of Crimea and parts of Donetsk and Lugansk regions of Ukraine, many Ukrainians changed their minds on NATO accession, considering the alliance as major security guarantee for our country. In February 2019, the Parliament of Ukraine approved amendments to the Constitution, making accession to NATO and the EU the main foreign policy goals of Ukraine. In September last year, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky signed the application for membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Ukraine's accession to NATO will strengthen the Euro-Atlantic community and its defense capability. Ukraine's ambitions for membership in the alliance remain unchanged, so we are working on the positions to support our Euro-Atlantic cause. We have no doubts that in the future Ukraine will be a NATO member, but we are realists. We understand that will definitely happen when the security situation allows. Our expectations from the forthcoming NATO summit in Vilnius in July are focused on two key priorities. Fixing in one form or another the absence of alternatives to the fact that we are on the track to NATO membership, and before joining the alliance, obtaining security guarantees. These security guarantees cannot replace or substitute for Ukraine membership in NATO, but will serve as a guarantee of Ukraine's security until full membership in the alliance, which has no alternative for us. As mentioned by our colleagues, my country is not only a victim of the aggression, it is a defender of Europe. Providing us now with modern fighters, tanks, long-range missiles, air and missile defense systems and ammunition will be the best long-term investment in the continent's security. Despite of fake stories inspired or created by the Russian propaganda, Ukraine uses all its partner security assistance responsibly, transparently and effectively. Ukraine is grateful to its international partners for their military assistance and unwavering support for Ukraine's freedom struggle. Summing up, I would like to ask myself and everyone present here a question. Would Russia have attempted to intervene in Ukraine in 2014, as well as have started its full-scale war of aggression in 2021 if my country had been a member of NATO at that time? The answer is clear, no, because of the provisions of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, which provides that an attack against one ally is considered as an attack against all allies. And such a security umbrella has stimulated the conscious choice of many European countries to apply for NATO membership, regarding it as their best security guarantee and realizing which country has been and remains the real threat to European and global security. Only Ukraine's accession to NATO and joining the EU will permanently deprive Russia of its dreams of capturing Ukraine, and therefore its imperialist ambitions and revanchist aspirations. Overcoming these aspirations of the Russian Federation is the only way to its democratic development in the future. Thus, Ukraine's membership in the EU and NATO is the only way to change and democratize Russia, which is a necessary component of guaranteeing peace and security in the region and the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Now it's time for our Q&A session, and I would like to invite our moderator, Dr. Kenneth Houston, up to the stage to join our guest, please. Everyone, please give a big round of applause.
Okay, testing. All right, we're working. Okay. Thank you all very much for accepting our invitation. We're very pleased to host such an esteemed panel of individuals with respect to the Ukraine question, but in particular, without diminishing the presence of the other guests, I would like to especially highlight the importance of having the Ukraine voice here today, because there's been a lot of discussion about Ukraine, as I'm sure all of our students know, our classrooms are replete with many references to the current crisis. But it's also important, I think, to have Ukraine's voice here today, and I think we should highlight and note that. I am going to open the floor for questions just in a moment. I'll just sum up and add a few additional sort of pointers with respect to the kind of ground that we might cover, without prejudice to people's formulated questions. There is a small technical issue in that we only have one microphone up here, so anyone that wants to ask a question is going to have to temporarily migrate to the middle of the floor in order to ask the question. I would ask as well that people indicate to whom the question is addressed. It might be useful. If it's addressed to all, that's fine, but if it is addressed to a specific guest, then please make that known. I am also going to prioritise our ERGA students to make sure that they get an opportunity to ask a question, because this is an incredibly important subject for that major, for the students doing it. I'd like to add a few very quick remarks. We have actually a little bit ahead of time about some of the aspects that we've covered, but maybe I'd like to maybe just flesh out a little bit. We talked very briefly, Ambassador Schmidt, at the very start about what happens not alone post-conflict, if we're not looking too far ahead, without prejudice to what is, at the moment the top subject, I suppose, in social media, the upcoming Ukrainian counter-offensive. But what kind of post-conflict would we look at? There was a lot of talk, if you may remember, with respect to very much a focus on Vladimir Putin as an individual, as the driver of this conflict. It's not inaccurate to say that there are people to the right of Putin in Russia. And we need to be very careful about assuming that simply removing Putin and that is going to solve this problem as well, because there may also be problems with respect to the future of Russia itself. And a lot of the post-conflict, I suppose, unfolding of that process is going to depend a lot too on what happens domestically within Russia after this. In addition to that, I've seen some reports, I don't know if you're in a position to comment about it, about some tensions within the Franco-German alliance about this issue of strategic autonomy. It might be useful maybe to think about that and to think about how that might impact things. And of course, bringing it then closer to home as well, the issue of, as was mentioned by several of the guests, the question of the impact on the war in Ukraine on the Asian context with specific respect to China, Taiwan, maybe add in the South China Sea, etc., etc. One other additional miscalculation I think that we maybe need to take into account, and Ambassador Schmidt has outlined a few of them, but I think there was one more that Putin miscalculated on, and that was the competence of his own military. Without diminishing the resilience and the bravery of the Ukrainian forces at the moment, I think that has become something of a surprise to quite a lot of observers. So with that out of the way, and that sort of sum up out of the way, I'd like to invite questions, particularly from our ERGA students. So if anyone would like to take to the microphone. Yeah, if you just want to move over to the microphone, or the microphone is there at a small table just beside the camera. Maybe if we could get one of our liaison students to make sure, yeah, just to be there for the question. Okay.
Hello. First of all, I feel sorry for the suffering and loss in Ukraine. It's an event that should never happen in the modernized world. With all the respect, please correct me if I'm wrong. The Nord Stream pipe connecting the gas line from Russia to Germany directly has been blew up by the US. Is that true?
I'm just wondering to whom you're addressing the question. You want all of them to comment on that?
maybe the ambassador of Germany, Mr. Schmidt, please.
The ambassador of Germany.
Yes, please.
I don't know if you're in a position to answer that. But
It's okay if you don't want to answer that.
No, of course, there's an ongoing investigation about that. Countries join forces, like Sweden, Denmark, Germany, investigators from different countries try to find out what actually happened, why it happened. And until we have an official report on it, I think we have to be very careful. There have been lots of speculations. People said it's Russia, some people said it's Ukraine, some people said it's Poland, some people said it's the US. So I would be careful, but of course we want to find out what happened and why it happened.
And because of that, it made Germany use around 100 billion euros in energy price after the war started, which is about 2.5% of the German GDP. And you also sent around 2.3 billion euros in military aid to Ukraine. And as you mentioned in your presentation, it's the second most after the US. And you also explained that you don't need to rely on the Russian energy anymore. And you said you would support Ukraine until the end. What about the impact on your own economy? Can you comment on that, please?
Of course I can comment. It was a huge impact on our economy. It created, if you look at the gas prices and the electricity prices, and they're linked, they're connected, they shot up. And it was very, very difficult for German entrepreneurs and also for private households to deal with this. So we took a lot of money to first subsidize consumers, secondly support our business, and third, calm down the markets. Markets don't like uncertainty. And it was a new situation. It happened very fast. It was a huge strain, and it is a huge strain on our economy. But we managed so far, which is remarkable. People predicted that we wouldn't manage it. It costs a lot of money. But again, like, we're spending money. The Ukrainians are spending lives. They're being attacked. So this is an act of solidarity to do that. And we do that because we feel that the attack on Ukraine is an attack on European peace order. But it is a huge challenge for our economy. It is a huge challenge. We would much rather spend less money on the army and more on, for instance, the transformation for climate change. This is the true challenge for us, all of us. I mean, if you imagine aliens flying to this planet and they have a brief and they say, oh, this planet is about, the human species is about to create a lot of problems because climate is changing, this and this. And what are they doing about it? Well, there's a war between country A and country B for territories, there's this happening, that happening. The aliens would probably think, oh, there's no intelligent life on this species. I mean, the fight on climate change is the one we should really focus on. And the only good thing that comes out of this energy shock in Germany, because Putin just switched off the gas tap, is that we have to really speed up and accelerate our transformation away from fossil fuels. But it's a shock therapy.
One more, please.
okay, you're pushing it now. Can we try and confine it to a question?
Is the last question now. So, in case the war keeps going for like the next year or two, what would be your strategy to combat like the energy crisis or like the impact on your economy?
We're continuing with like the temporary measures, so to replace the Russian gas with LNG by building terminals and importing, rerouting the energy flows within Europe, take more energy in from North Africa. Algeria is an important supplier. Norway has done a lot to actually alleviate the energy crisis. And this is not just the German crisis. All the energy support in continental Europe, we are linked by a system of pipelines. And again, it shows that we can't do it just one country on our own. We have to work together. We have to work together with France, we have to work together with the Czech Republic and others. There are other countries who have a much higher dependency on Russian gas actually than Germany. And they, rightly so, they say, look, if we want solidarity, we need to have solidarity. How do we get on? Hungary has a very high dependency rate on Russian gas. And of course they're worried. If you're a policymaker and more than 60 or 70% of your energy comes from one source, which by the way is not a clever policy, sorry Germany, but if that's your policy, then you're in trouble. And you're in trouble. It's all about like diversifying your risks. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry, you want to add? Yeah.
Maybe just a quick comment on energy in Europe. This transformation that is taking place now and that's been accelerated is very important, and it's also fascinating to follow. There is a lot of investments in wind and solar currently. I read in the newspaper that two weekends ago we had negative electricity prices in Sweden for one day because of a very sunny weekend in Germany and the solar parks. So it's happening now. This is of course very, very positive. So I'm quite optimistic. It's also about European solidarity. We continue to help each other on this. So that's also important to bear in mind. Thank you.
Okay. Do any of the other guests? Yeah.
I would like also to comment on this. I'm very grateful for solidarity with Ukraine, and if we speak about impact on Ukraine's economy of the ongoing war of aggression caused by Russia, it's for the last year we had 30% of GDP decline, 30% of GDP decline. Russian forces continue attacking Ukraine, not only military objects, not only killing our military officers and soldiers, but also attacking civilian infrastructure, industrial infrastructure, energy infrastructure. We had, during the winter time, we had deficit because they deliberately targeted our energy facilities. We had huge deficit of electricity, but we managed to stabilize this situation. And of course, we are resilient just to counter the aggressor. We are resilient, but we are very grateful just for solidarity of all the European nations with us, and thank you also for your sympathy, so your words of sympathy towards my country. Thank you.
I'm reminded, actually, I saw a report in the UK Guardian yesterday or the day before that Ukraine has actually constructed more wind farms than the United Kingdom in the last 12 months. I don't know how true that is, but in spite of the aggression, that seems to be, that was a report that came through in the Guardian. It's a reasonably reliable paper, but I'm not sure how true it is. Okay. Do we have another question from? Yeah, okay.
Okay, sir, from your guys' perspective, I would like to ask that in this situation, East Russia is also the victim because this conflict emerged due to the fact that Ukraine attempted to join the NATO. I don't have much information about the NATO, but however, I feel like I may not feel okay if there is something might affect my security nearby my house or my sovereignty. So please correct me if I'm wrong or educate me. Thank you.
Are you addressing anyone in particular, or do you want each of the?
Yes, each of them.
Okay, so. Yep.
Thank you for your question. I reject any claims that this was provoked. This is a narrative that we have seen since the invasion. Also prominent scholars. I noticed Jeffrey Sachs the other day claiming that this was provoked. It was not. And even if it was, every country must have the right to choose its own security arrangements. But again, this was not provoked. It cannot be seen as a provoked action. There is one aggressor and one aggressor only, and that is the Russian Federation. There is no justification whatsoever for what they have done. That would be my short answer.
So it's a long-time Russian narrative that expansion of NATO endangers their own security. But if you look at NATO, it's a defensive alliance. It says that, as it's been mentioned here, that attack against one ally is against at all allies. So the only thing that NATO endangers is Russian ability to attack its neighbors. So whatever neighbor of Russia enters NATO, it's out of their reach. This is how NATO endangers Russia. And if it's the only thing that endangers Russia, it's good to do that. So I don't imagine what other reason would be for Russia to feel endangered by NATO expansion. NATO is an area of peace and stability. So the only thing that does is expanding the area of peace and stability around Russia, which should be good for Russia. But obviously for the current Russian regime, it's danger because it shows to the Russian citizens that countries like of former USSR can live in peace, can live in prosperity, and it's obviously a very, very big threat to the Russian regime because the Russian regime wants instability around its borders to show their citizens, well, you should be glad for living in Russia because all around Russia there's instability and we protect you from that. So the notion that NATO expansion endangers Russia is clear nonsense.
Okay, well, Russia a victim. Good question. No, Russia is not a victim. And you know, as I mentioned in my statement, every country has a legitimate right to tackle its security concerns by joining any alliance, which is, as Michal correctly mentions, is defensive. We can have examples as post-Soviet Union countries like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. They are members of the NATO. They have borders with, yes, all of them. Two of them have borders with the Russian Federation. Russia has not attacked them. Those countries which were not members of the NATO, unfortunately, my country was not the member of the NATO in 2014. Neither Georgia was the member of the NATO in 2008 when Russia attacked it. Also, we have an example of Moldova with their Transnistria separatist region with Russian troops being still there. So I cannot imagine how can Russia be regarded as victim. And we have our legitimate right to choose our security guarantees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the panel want to come in on that? Or? No? All right, can we get another question? There was a hand there. Yeah.
Go first.
Down here near the front with the... Okay.
Hello, okay. When you were saying that NATO will support Ukraine until Ukraine liberate every area that was recognized by the international community, is it including Crimea as well?
Crimea is an inalienable part of Ukraine. It has not, I think no country but Russia, perhaps some pariahs like North Korea have recognized Crimea as part of Russia, but Thailand supports territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. Thailand recognizes Crimea as part of Ukraine. Almost all international community recognizes Crimea as part of Ukraine. So it is part of Ukraine according to the international law.
Okay. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question. So thank you for coming here. Listening to you guys, I have changed a lot of my perspective. So what I really want to ask is, I focus on the mention on global security. So before listening to you today, I always believe that Thailand is always and will be affected by the war. However, with the implication that you mentioned that if we let Russia invade Ukraine, China could invade Taiwan, and our neighboring country will be next. However, I still believe that people surrounding me